Hey there and welcome to episode 24 of I'm Just Gonna Say It. Today we're going to talk about evidence for extraterrestrials. We've covered this subject before. You definitely have to check out my other video on my close encounter. A link will be down in the description. But today we're going to talk about FAA officials and military officers and people with such high repute that you kind of have to believe them. So here we go with episode number 24. Now this episode is going to be the first in a series of episodes on the subject, and I want them to serve as kind of a collection of evidence that is almost impossible to deny, because a lot of the times with evidence of UFOs, it's blurry videos or it's single people who witnessed it, nothing that you can really confirm. While there is a lot of evidence like that out there, so I want this to be a collection of that, to help you convince the people who are totally unaware of this. And I think that's something we need to do, because the more people are aware of their existence, I think the bigger the chances that they will actually contact us. But that's a whole different subject. Now we're going to start off the series today by talking about the Washington Flap event, as well as the 2001 National Press Club event hosted by Steven Greer. Here we go. In 1952 there was an event called the Washington Flap, also named the Invasion of Washington. It involved multiple UFO sightings stretching over a period of 17 days, starting July the 12th, 1952. Two of these events were most publicized on and involved multiple witnesses, and are therefore the most interesting. The first one of these events started on July the 19th. An air traffic controller at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, which was then still called Washington National Airport, named Edward Nugent, spotted 7 objects on his radar, located 15 miles or 24 kilometers south-southwest of the city. No known aircraft were in the area, and the objects were not following any established flight paths. Nugent's superior, Harry Barnes, later stated about the event, "We knew immediately that a very strange situation existed. Their movements were completely radical compared to those of ordinary aircraft." They verified both their equipment and the sightings with other airports. At this point, other objects appeared in all sectors of the radar scope. When they moved over the White House and the United States Capitol, Barnes called Andrews Air Force Base, located 10 miles from Washington National. They reported no unusual objects on their radar, but moments later an airman called the base's control tower to report the sighting of a strange object. Airman William Brady, who was in the tower, said he saw an object which appeared to be like an orange ball of fire, trailing a tail. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. As Brady tried to alert the other personnel in the tower, the strange object took off at an unbelievable speed. At 3 a.m., just before 2 United States Air Force F-94 Starfire jet fighters from Newcastle Air Force Base arrived in the area, all of the objects vanished from the radar. However, when the jets ran low on fuel and were forced to leave, the objects returned, implicating the UFOs were monitoring radio traffic and behaving accordingly. Barnes too stated he was convinced of this. The second of these events started on July 26th. A pilot and a flight attendant on a National Airlines flight into Washington observed some strange lights above their plane. Within minutes, both radar centers at National Airport and at Andrews Air Force Base were tracking more unknown objects. Sergeant Charles E. Cummings saw the objects at Andrews and later said that these lights did not have the characteristics of shooting stars. There was no trails. They traveled faster than any shooting star I have ever seen. At times the objects traveled slowly, at other times they reversed direction and moved across the radar scope at speeds calculated to be up to 11,250 kilometers per hour. At 11:30 p.m., 2 F-94 Starfire jet fighters from Newcastle Air Force Base arrived again over Washington. The flight leader didn't see anything, despite repeated attempts. However, his wingman, Lieutenant William Patterson, did see 4 white glows and chased them. He later stated about the event that, "I tried to make contact with the bogies below 1,000 feet. I was at my maximum speed. I ceased chasing them because I saw no chance of overtaking them." When ground control later asked Patterson if he saw anything, Patterson replied, "I see them now and they're all around me. What should I do?" And nobody answered because they didn't know what to tell him. There were also witnesses claiming to have seen actual structured craft, not just bright lights. On July 19th, a man named Joseph Gagandit, an army officer, was sitting on the front porch of his home in Alexandria, Virginia, when at 9:30 p.m. he claimed to see a red cigar-shaped object which flew slowly over his house. Gagandit thought the object's size was comparable to a DC-7 airplane at about 10,000 feet altitude. He also claimed that the object had a series of lights on its sides. It flew back over his house again, which led Gagandit to think it was circling the area. When it flew away a second time, it turned a deeper red color and moved over the city of Washington itself. This occurred less than 2 hours before Edward Nugent first spotted the unknown objects on his radar at Washington National. The extremely high number of UFO reports in 1952 disturbed both the Air Force and the Central Intelligence Agency. Both felt that an enemy nation could deliberately flood the US with false UFO reports, causing mass panic and allowing them to launch a sneak attack. On September the 24th, 1952, the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence, also known as OSI, sent a memorandum to Walter B. Smith, the CIA's director at the time. The memo stated, "The flying saucer situation has national security implications. In the public concern with the phenomena lies the potential for the touching off of mass hysteria and panic. It is quite obvious that we're not dealing with a misidentified weather balloon or some swamp gas, to name two of the most used excuses. The Washington Flap incident was a genuine UFO incident, with all indications pointing towards a non-terrestrial intelligence as the source. It happened in a time when the government wasn't as secretive as they are now about these events." Let's have a look at General John A. Samford's statement on the UFO incidents.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States. Is that? We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
Now, the invasion of Washington was only an example of a plethora of cases mentioned in Project Blue Book, now declassified by the CIA. Granted, it was one of the most spectacular and most widely observed. even though the Army eventually concluded most sightings were explainable. In the video description you will find a link to the entire Blue Book file, so you can take a look at some of these cases yourself, straight from the archives of the CIA. I think that confirms this case as being a pretty solid piece of evidence. Another example where Army officials made some revealing statements was the National Press Club event of 2001, hosted by Dr. Steven Greer. Dr. Greer took it upon himself to gather a group of people, all current or ex-Army and Navy officers, pilots, FAA officials and other highly reputed people who were willing to make statements about their knowledge of UFOs and the government's projects involving them. And these statements don't mess around. From an Army official stating we already have had contact, to a government official making an estimate of the US's black budget, some mind-blowing facts were shared with the public that day. Definitely worth viewing is the story told by Werner von Braun's assistant. A link to the complete event on video is posted in the description. Here are some of its best examples.
And they were watching a UFO on a radar that was hovering at about 80,000 feet. It sat there for about 10 minutes and then slowly descended until it dropped off the radar, was gone for about 5-10 minutes, and then instantly reappeared at 80,000 feet, stationary. The next sweep of the radar, it was 200 miles away, stationary. It hovered there for about 10 minutes and redid the whole cycle twice more. When I found out what you normally do when you see a UFO, I was told that you notify NORAD, you don't necessarily write anything down, you don't write anything down, and you keep it to yourself. It's a need-to-know basis only.
Circle of white lights on the water. We watched this for a while, the lights went out, there was nothing on the water. Next thing we saw was a yellow halo, small, much smaller than whatever it was launched from, and that was 15 miles away, up to our altitude. Because of the trajectory, I disengaged the autopilot, shoved the nose over to try to go under this thing. At that time, I heard a noise underneath. I thought maybe it hit us. It was actually some of the crew members ducking, and they collided, and a couple of them were injured. Then it appeared over to the right and moved out slowly and flew with us. It was still not at our altitude, but we could see the shape of it. It had a dome. We could see the coronal discharge.
Good morning. My name is Mark McCandlish, and for the last 21 years, I have worked as a conceptual artist for a variety of defense contractors. I've been involved in conceptual artwork or the production thereof for Rockwell on the X-30 program, and also on the HISTEP program. That's spelled HYSTP, means Hypersonic Testbed Program. During the course of my career, I've twice had a secret security clearance. In 1967, while my father was stationed at Westover Air Force Base, the headquarters for 8th Air Force Strategic Air Command, I witnessed and watched through a telescope a UFO which hovered over a nuclear weapons storage facility for approximately 10 minutes and then departed with an acceleration approaching a bullet leaving a rifle barrel. In 1988, in November, a college buddy of mine, an associate by the name of Brad Sorensen, informed me that he had personally witnessed 3 flying saucers at a very large hangar at Norton Air Force Base during the course of an air show that was held on Saturday, November 12, 1988. I subsequently called my congressman from that district. I called his office. This was Congressman George E. Brown Jr., who at the time was the chairman of the Congressional Committee on Space Science and Advanced Technology.
He said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space." And I said, teachers don't stop until June. He said, "No, you have to understand, this is February, and we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies," he said, "against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over. And the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
We are going to close this first set of examples with Paul Hellyer. Paul is a former Canadian defense minister who recently started disclosing his knowledge on UFOs and also made some pretty shocking statements.
And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on, because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. And UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally.
Now remember, all the cases mentioned in this video were confirmed by government officials. That isn't the kind of evidence you can just wipe off the table, even as the most hardened skeptic. Yet for some reason, all this information is not yet widely known. And we showed you just the tip of the iceberg. This episode, it was the first in a series featuring evidence for extraterrestrials. In the next episode in this series, we will look at all the evidence that exists for UFOs maneuvering close to our... And with that, we conclude this episode. Please subscribe for more videos about this and other mind-bending topics, and like and share the video, of course. In the comments, please let us know if you have any UFO experiences yourself. We would love to read about them. Until the next episode, bye-bye.